Short story by Paul McCann. May mornings. One morning in May, the blue sky had left Belfast, and grey clouds hung themselves in an empty sky. The rain poured down on the Civil Rights March, and all the people got drenched. The march was stopped at the bridge by the police. Like animals, they brought down the buttons upon the peaceful parade, and the marchers began to fall. Unable to get to their feet, they could not march any further. Jesus wept. Innocent blood was washed from their faces and swept down into the river. The brute force was captured by an overseas film crew. Inside the city was a growing community of photographers, journalists, and sightseers, witnessing firsthand just what was taking place. Eventually the truth was getting out and the propaganda machine was switched off. One morning in May, as I read the morning newspaper, I was shocked by the number of people who had been killed during the night before. I wished it not to be true, but the sad face of my city was scarred by the brutality of a war escalating every day. The front page of the newspapers had graphic photographs of the cars and the buses that were upturned and burning. There were pictures of soldiers with rifles pointing into a crowd of those throwers. I saw photographs of their homes in the little streets where I lived on fire. The inside pages tried to explain the story behind the madness around Northern Ireland in 1968, as each day homes were burnt and people were killed. TV crews from all over the world began to arrive and capture on film the horror of war. At night, when you switched on the TV and watched the news, it brought home how real the war was. As the streets around my home were portrayed by the journalists and their reports of a bloodbath the night before, it sent a message to the rest of the world how helpless we all felt in Belfast. Last night's fatalities included 7 men shot dead in a corner bar by some crazed gunman with a death wish who crossed over the divide with murder on his mind. 3 special branch officers were found shot dead in their parked car. Then there were the combatant corpses that lay on pavements on both sides of the road. The dead count in all numbered over 25 civilians, 7 British soldiers, 5 policemen, and 3 members of the special branch. Scores of people were in a serious condition in the Belfast City Hospital. People had learned to switch off from it all. Some say war is a necessary thing. It had to happen, and for whatever the reason, it is acceptable. Growing up with a war, you learn to adapt to whatever life throws at you. It's easy to sleep when you're tucked up in a warm bed, listening to the sound of gunfire ripping through the sky. It's easy to turn a blind eye to those who fight for a cause they believe in. It's hard to get up in the morning and discover that innocent life has been lost. It's even harder still when that life is someone close to you. It's hard not to react and give in to the anger brewing inside you and seek after revenge. After wrestling with demons, I evicted those thoughts of hatred from my life and spent time doing spiritual retreats. I was able to escape from the war in the wilderness of the streets of my hometown. People called me Garda, Gandhi, Gucci, all kinds of names, because I'd shaved my head and walked around in a suit and tie. I kind of liked being bald. I felt kind of spiritual. Kind of left me out there in the open about things. Maybe it could have even been a religious thing without the sackcloth and ashes, but I did my own penance and prayers for my beloved city of Belfast. I prayed constantly for peace that never seemed to come. I felt distant but close to God in my dark night of the soul experience. I stopped asking why we had to have war and learned to accept the way it was. There is a lot to be said for serenity. One morning in May, after I had read the morning newspapers, I swallowed a cup of tea and ate some toast and headed down into the city centre. I passed along the junction of the Antrim and Cliftonville roads before saying hello to some of the beggars standing on the footpath. They were the alcoholics with a smile who I had known for years. Some of them turned to drink to cope with the situation in Belfast. Others were just born that way, inherited in their DNA. Sometimes when I had something extra in my pocket, I would hand over a few bob to them and buy them a bottle of something. It always helped them through, and I enjoyed having a chat with them. "Good morning, Gandhi," they would say. "Give me some skin Gucci." I'd answer them back, just with an open hand. They called me Gandhi because I shaved my head. I like being bald, yeah. Maybe it could have even helped other people to go baldy too. I started noticing around the town a kind of fashion with people around with their heads shaved. I suppose there's a reason why we all have to do things in our lives. One morning in May, I went for an early morning walk through the city centre, and I got into a taxi. There was always someone waiting for a taxi in Kessel Street. So I put my suitcase on the roof of the taxi, sat beside the driver. "Take me to the airport," I said. That morning I felt as if life had come to an end. There was an eerie silence that clung to the air, because I was saying goodbye to the place where I grew up. An ambulance thundered past. The taxi probably had another victim inside with some sectarian slaughter. Another year, another day, I thought to myself. After years of murders, all the cemeteries in Belfast were full, all the prisons and internment camps were bursting with inmates, all the factories had long gone been closed. All that remained now was the slaughterhouse. I could no longer live in the slaughterhouse and decided it was time to leave. It was very hard for me to do. One of the hardest things I had ever done in my life, but it was necessary if I was to remain healthy and sane. It was one of those mornings in May, in a country far away, when I lifted up the newspaper and read the report about the Good Friday Agreement in 1996. There were some pictures of the TV broadcast that evening when I saw parades and people running around flying flags, all for the sake of peace. I saw at long last the blue sky had returned to Belfast, and the kids were out playing in the streets. And I prayed for the people of Belfast, and maybe God will give me the grace one day to return to that place one morning in May. The end.